Hey everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to episode 169 of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu Show. So we did it. Today, I actually did not want to record this intro. I have had the episode done for like 6 weeks, but I didn't really feel like recording the intro, outro, and editing today, but I had to. Had no choice. Today marks week 52 in a row, Thursday 52, the 52nd Thursday, that's a better way to say that, in a row that I have posted an episode of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu Show. So, you guys, hold the applause. Come on, guys. Come chill with the applause. It's getting out of hand. But yeah, a whole year of posting consecutively on the podcast. I don't know how we're going to top that. I'm thinking that I'll actually be back in a studio, a recording studio, and not sitting in my living room holding the mic in my hand like a poor person. Thor, stop barking, with my dog barking right next to me. He wouldn't even stand in the background either. I was hoping I could get him in the background and it would make this shot look a little better, but he wouldn't do it. Regardless, we are an entire year of posting Thursday episodes. I guess the only way to top it is to do 2 years in a row of posting Thursday episodes. We'll also have a bunch of interviews for you guys. I don't know if it'll be at the start of the year. I think it'll probably be a few weeks into the year that we start to really push out the interviews. I'll have my wife's in the kitchen. She just asked if she could come on the show. Yeah, babe. Sure, you can come on the show. No, we don't let blue belts on the podcast. But anyway, they're not people. Anyway, back to what I was saying. You messed up my train of thought, babe. Dang it. This is why blue belts aren't allowed on the show. But anyway, like I said, 52 in a row, and we finished strong with a really weird episode where I'm trying to make 10-year predictions, and it's off the rails, as you guys seem to love. Without further ado, let's get into the incoherent babblings of a madman that this episode really is. Let's check out this episode. Here is where I see Jiu-Jitsu going in the next 10 years. And now, little preface on this. Before we get into this episode, keep in mind, every episode on the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu Show is the ramblings of a madman while sitting in his office talking about Jiu-Jitsu. But today, they're going to be even more ramblings of a madman, because I'm going to try to predict the future of Jiu-Jitsu 10 years from now. And I have some ideas. And so I think the first place we should start, if we're trying to look at where Jiu-Jitsu is going to be in the next 10 years, spoiler alert, this episode is going to end with Jiu-Jitsu dying. So if you are not comfortable with that idea and why it will probably happen, you probably shouldn't listen to this one. But let's talk about training method. Let's get into where I think, if Jiu-Jitsu progresses in the manner that it should, where I think the training method will be 10 years from now, in the year 2033. Because, we're starting out 2023. We'll look at the next 10 years and where Jiu-Jitsu is going to go. First off, with training method, I think that we will see game-based training way developed. I think that really most of the jiu-jitsu training, most of the things, the techniques that are taught, could be way simpler if we looked at them as in it being games, being really small parts of jiu-jitsu. Another way of explaining this, my friend John Thomas always says that jiu-jitsu is like a bunch of mini games, and they all have their own rules, right? So the rules when you are dealing with somebody in De La Riva guard might be different than the rules that you are dealing with somebody in Spider guard. And most of learning jiu-jitsu is just learning the rules to every single game and then getting good at playing those games very quickly and being good at, recognizing where you're at and then starting to play the game of De La Hiva, or play the game of Spider Guard, or play the game of passing De La Hiva or passing Spider Guard. And so as we are starting to develop more jujitsu, I'm starting to realize breaking it down into just techniques, and I think most coaches are agreeing with this more and more now, breaking things down into just techniques is not enough. You really do need simple goals and simple ideas for people to follow versus just, hey, this is a movement, try to learn to repeat this movement, right? When you start to look at that, you can break jiu-jitsu down into being kind of, we talk about designated winner a lot on the show, but not even just designated winner. In a sense of a simple game is learning how to control somebody's hip and doing that with single leg X or outside ashi or whatever you call it, but just using the leg position to control somebody. If you teach somebody the game of, you are going to keep my hip, I'm going to try to use my hands to free my hip, I'm going to try to use walking, use whatever I can to get my hip free, and your only job is to control my hip. What I've done is I've taken the main fight of single leg X and I've turned it into a really easy to understand game. The main fight of single leg X is, can I actually keep control of your hips? Once I lose control of your hip, I am not in single leg X anymore. I'm almost in mount. But while I have control of your hips with my legs, that is what makes the position single leg X. The more that we can start to find parts of jiu-jitsu that can be simplified and turned into really simple games for people to start sparring in, the more that they can learn to win those games easier, right? And so I'll give you some example of some games that we might play at my gym. So we think one of the biggest things when it comes to passing the guard is contact with the upper thigh. If you watch any good guard passer, at some point or another when passing the guard, they will have to, with their legs or their hands, touch their opponent's upper thighs. We can explain that differently. The reason that this matters is when we are pulling our knees to our chest and I'm on my back, the goal there is to keep the person out of my armpit hip space, your elbow knee space, whatever you want to call that. That's the goal, right? So for the passer, the goal is to get into that space. The easiest way to understand getting into that space is getting in contact with the upper thigh so you can pull the upper thigh away from the body, and that's going to stop protecting. It's going to open up that hip space so I can land in side control or I can land in mount, right? So we can take this game as a game of, if I can touch your upper thigh for 2 or 3 seconds, then that is a win for me. And if I explain this game and then let my students start playing and then have somebody walk in the room that didn't hear the explanation, they'll watch and they'll go, oh, they're just fighting to pass the guard, because it looks exactly the same. But the thing about the position, the thing about that idea is the bottom person is also getting reps on learning to pull their knees to their chest and learning to use their hands to protect their upper thighs. Really, you're learning to use their hands to break grips that are not favorable. But we turned that into a game. That whole fight that is for, really, that's like a black belt level of understanding guard passing, being able to get into contact with the upper thighs to open that space. But if you turn it into a game, a white belt, a child could play that game and they could start developing guard passing, or at least a huge piece of guard passing through that game. And so I think the first thing that you are going to find 10 years from now, to all the people that are listening in 2033, when you are walking into a gym, something you will find is that they play way more games than we do now in 2023 or 22. They, especially than we did 10 years prior. 10 years ago, positional sparring really was not a thing. I mean, it was groundbreaking if you were going into a gym and they were positional sparring. Only the good, really, really good gyms understood that importance, right? These games that I'm talking about are ways to play positional sparring, but instead of just looking at jiu-jitsu as a position, you look at the position and figure out what the actual goals and the actual intentions are. Eventually, then you start to take that game of being in contact with the upper thigh and you start to apply it to your regular jiu-jitsu and you start to actually positional spar. Eventually, you will be at live rolling. I don't think we will do away with live rolling. That is the most fun part of jiu-jitsu for most of us. But when it comes to actually developing skills and getting better, I think that the big difference is going to be that we are going to have more structure to the games that we play in order to get better. And the reason that I think that that is going to happen is because good teams are already doing this. The really high level teams are there, maybe they don't have a structured way of saying it yet, but the people that I know that go to different high level schools and I ask what's happening, what are they doing differently? Pretty much most of the time it's that they're playing games, that they're learning a little bit differently, that they're explaining a little bit differently, but then they're spending less time on the long rounds and more time on winning the individual skills, learning what individual skills matter. Next, I think that how jiu-jitsu is taught will be different. Right now, to this day, still the buzzword is systems. Oh my gosh, they have a system of playing guard. You can't beat it. It's a system. You can't beat it. Most of the systems in jiu-jitsu are not systems at all. Okay. Most of the systems are people just throwing together a few techniques that they like to do and then calling it a system. First of all, just understand for a jiu-jitsu system to be a thing, it needs to start with an easy step one or step one, I think is the best way to explain it. So you can explain this as like a funnel. It needs to be a funnel that you can let people fall into your system. And your system then, it is not all of jiu-jitsu. You don't have an open guard system, right? You have an easy fight from open guard that you can win a lot. So maybe your system starts with 2-on-1, or maybe it starts with a cross sleeve grip or something like that. That is where your system begins, because you're limiting the amount of jiu-jitsu that can be done by starting with saying, okay, I'm going to learn everything from collar sleeve and develop a system from there. I first learn to get to collar sleeve, and then my system starts to develop. And my system has to basically have an answer for everything. As you get better, though, you will find that when we're doing systems at first, when systems are being pushed to you, it's going to be 12, 15, 20 techniques. And that's like a good system, right? But as you start to find the systems that really work, they're like 3 techniques and a really good idea on how to get those 3 techniques to work. And then a really simple understanding of when to go for which one of those 3 techniques. Most of the time, the systems that we're buying, they're just other instructionals. They're just the list of moves, right? But a real system has an easy step A and then has an answer for everything. Sometimes, hopefully, as you get better, that answer is simple. It's like the less answers that I need, the better that my system is, right? Maybe my system, you can only have 3 responses from the way I play collar sleeve. And no matter what, those 3 responses end up with me either sweeping or submitting you. That is a real system in jiu-jitsu. When you just know a bunch of moves from a position, it is not systemized. It is not, hey, if the foot goes here, then you go here. And then if the hand goes here, then you can attack this. That is how a system works in jiu-jitsu. But that being said, that way of thinking will probably die too. I think now would be a perfect time to explain to you guys again that these are the ramblings of a madman. This is not fact that I'm spouting off at you. These are just my ideas. I think that the system will be killed by a system of values, meaning instead of you need to know these 20 techniques for the 20 different responses that you might get while playing collar sleeve guard, I think that we will look at collar sleeve guard totally different. I think that we will say, okay, first off, we have our grips, and the first value is not letting your opponent control your free leg from collar sleeve. So if I'm playing cross collar with my right hand, my right leg would be my free leg, right? That would be the first value. And so no matter what, my first fight in this system of values is to keep my right leg free. And then the second value is to get into contact with my opponent's hips. Okay, again, these are not techniques that we're talking about. These are how we are looking at valuing where we're at in this fight. And then once I am in contact with the hips, maybe the next value is pummeling that free leg to the shoulder. Because once I have those two things, I have a triangle, I have an omoplata, I have a sweep. And they're going to be really easy to hit from those controls. If I let a brand new white belt start with those, let them win those few fights. Okay, you're going to start with collar sleeve, you're going to get a foot on my hip, and you're going to take your other foot and pummel it into my shoulder. I'm probably going to end up in a triangle. Obviously they'd have to be able to finish the triangle, but I am still probably going to end up there. And that is because he had a better understanding of the things that were actually valuable. So I think that systems are not going to matter as much as simple understanding and simple values. A good value to think about when you are on top and you're passing the guard, are they touching your hips? If they are touching you, I explained that from the bottom person's perspective, but as the top person, if someone is in contact with my hips, I cannot pass their guard. I know it sounds like a crazy broad statement, and it is, but you can test me on this one. If they are in contact with your hips, you will first have to free your hips and then pass the guard. We do it without thinking all the time. If somebody gets both of your sleeves and puts both of their feet in your hips, your response will be to walk away. You'll free your hips. You'll pull your elbows in tight and you'll try to walk away. And then as soon as your hips become free, you're mobile again and you can pass the guard. But I really think that jiu-jitsu will be taught in systems of values. This is what we believe is the most important fight from here. And then this is the next. And then you can learn jiu-jitsu so much easier instead of just going, hey, maybe there's a move that works from here. Maybe there's not. And you can simplify it to just be in contact with the hips. That is your first fight. And it will pretty much always be. And then we'll learn different ways to express that idea. Okay, well, if I control both sleeves, it's way easier to get in contact with the hips, right? And so that would be the next value. So if you can't touch the hips, you should probably control the sleeves, because once you control the sleeves, then you can touch the hips. That's how I think jiu-jitsu will be taught differently. Of course, jiu-jitsu will always be techniques being taught. But I think that will be the big change in how it is being taught. And then we can kind of combine these two ideas, right? And this kind of game theory and the system of values. Eventually, each value will be turned into its own game. So being in contact with the hips, that is the game from guard. If I can keep you off my hips, you are losing the game. If you can stay in contact with my hips, you are winning the game. Because when we apply that to jiu-jitsu, if I'm in contact with your hips while I'm playing guard, I'm winning from guard. You cannot move forward on me if I stay in contact with your hips. You have basically another thing you need to check off, which is free your hips before you get to pass. And I think each one of those values, as we figure them out, as we learn them, will be expressed with its own game. Let's take a break before we move on to where competitive BJJ will end up, in my opinion. We'll talk about that right after the break. Hey guys, Josh here. Just wanted to interrupt the podcast really quick and tell you about something we have going on at simplifyingjujitsu.com. So right now, the 3 lenses is absolutely free. This is my latest ebook. And what it is about is the 3 perspectives that people tend to look through to learn jiu-jitsu. You have your scientist, you have your athlete, and you have your artist. And these are the 3 ways that people will like to learn jiu-jitsu. And what it does is it helps you identify which way you tend to learn jiu-jitsu. And if you know how you best learn, you can start to maximize your training, make it way more efficient and effective by just training that way. Or you can start to maximize your training by learning some of the other perspectives and some of the other things that those perspectives have to offer for you. And so the only way to get that is at simplifyingjujitsu.com/3. That is simplifyingjujitsu.com/3. And again, this ebook is absolutely free. What are you waiting for? Let's get back to the episode. I've said this once, I've said it a million times. Eventually, everything that matters, everything that is anything, turns into pro wrestling. Hear me out here. I know that people hate on pro wrestling all the time, because it's, in quotes, fake. I don't know where that rumor started, but a lot of people like to hate on it. Wrestling at first, professional wrestling at first, was an art. That was the first thing it was. These people were traveling around carnivals and they were putting on a show. And maybe these fights started off, and some of them arguably were even real when they were traveling around, when they were traveling around with the circus. But eventually, they started fixing these fights and they started making these fights an art. Hey, we're pretending to fight and there is a winner and a loser, right? That is their art, all right? So anytime we are thinking about professional wrestling and anything that isn't people in the ring in a staged match, that's the rest of professional wrestling, right? So what I mean by that is, okay, John Cena and whomever John Cena hates at the time, they're going to have a match on whatever Cyber Sunday or whatever the next pay-per-view is. And they sell this match and they sell this whole bad blood story that, of course, it's pretend. But this whole story, this whole storyline is made to make you want to watch the pay-per-view. And I know that's not like, oh my gosh, it's like a soap opera. It's so silly. But guess what? Every single one of us did the same thing, fell for the same trap that Vince McMahon has perfected when we wanted to watch Gordon Ryan versus Felipe Pena. And we were so excited about Gordon Ryan and Felipe Pena. We were not excited because these are the 2 best grapplers on the planet. We were excited because they don't like each other, and Felipe had beaten Gordon, and no one else seems to be able to do that. And he'd beaten him twice. That was the storyline. We all bought it. We all watched that Flow Grappling event. Don't lie. We all talked about it at the gym. That's just pro wrestling. You watch a UFC event. What do they show for 15 minutes before the fight starts? Oh, these guys have bad blood. Yeah, these guys, they hate each other. Just like they do when you watch pro wrestling, just like will continue to happen in jiu-jitsu. Now, there is going to be a difference, though. In the UFC, there is kind of the pinnacle right now, which is the UFC. Most fighters are trying to get a contract with the UFC. And then the UFC is its own little closed organization where, just like the WWE, where the UFC fighters fight the UFC fighters. And then they all have a Twitter and they all call each other out on Twitter. Now, the difference in jiu-jitsu, unless this changes sometime between now and the next 10 years, is there are not like exclusive contracts in jiu-jitsu. So the athletes that are growing their brand in jiu-jitsu, that are trying to get big, they're going to have to do things in order to get noticed. Just like, with WWE, they kind of tell you who is going to be the next big thing. We don't have that in jiu-jitsu, and we probably won't, unless somebody figures out a way to kind of get people to exclusively compete under them. But kind of the beauty of competing in jiu-jitsu is that you can compete every weekend. Physically you can do it, and not a lot of martial arts can you physically compete every weekend. But that is one of the beauties of jiu-jitsu. Now, what you'll notice, and this is happening now, is that go on YouTube, search jiu-jitsu. There are a lot of different jiu-jitsu YouTube personalities that are fighting for your attention. This is only going to continue as jiu-jitsu grows. And for a lot of us, one of the simplest ways to capture attention is with drama. And that is what is going to be rewarded for a long time. Eventually, I think that that superior ideas, superior ways of thinking will start to trump the drama. But right now, the best stuff online, the most watched stuff online for jiu-jitsu is just jiu-jitsu drama. It's this guy doesn't like this guy, or this is how Gordon Ryan did this, right? Because he is the king of drama right now. That's who people want to hear about. That's who people want to know about. We watched how one guy did this with no-gi. Let's think back 5 years ago. Nobody was doing no-gi. People thought that no-gi was dead. And then maybe 6 years ago now at this point. But when Gordon and those guys started to really make a name for no-gi and make no-gi interesting, I think that that is going to happen way, way more and not just be in jiu-jitsu. Okay, so this is where I get to the point where this is my crazy prediction. Okay, so basically this whole idea, with how jiu-jitsu will be, also is focused on the fact that jiu-jitsu is going to grow. No one knows how much it's going to grow, but let's say that there's something online right now that claims that the amount of people doing jiu-jitsu is like 3 million people. I think it would not be crazy to think that in 10 years, we would have 100 times more people doing jiu-jitsu. And I know that that sounds like a crazy amount. Okay, so 300 million people doing jiu-jitsu. I think that we are at a point where jiu-jitsu is going to start growing like that. But I also think it's going to start to become different. So we had one guy, being Gordon Ryan, make no-gi relevant. And a lot of the guys that he was fighting and beating really weren't big name no-gi guys, because there weren't big name no-gi guys. It was people that were big names from the gi that also competed in no-gi wanting a fight with Gordon, right? Or, he talked enough trash that they got mad and they really wanted to fight Gordon. But one guy took that whole sport, that whole part of jiu-jitsu, and made it huge. People now are going, oh, the gi is dead. It's all no-gi. Eventually, that's going to shift again. Maybe not, people won't do no-gi and they'll only do gi, but eventually there will be some athletes that come out and make the gi interesting to watch. Whether they do it because they talk trash about people from other countries and say, oh yeah, America is the best jiu-jitsu in the gi and everybody knows it. They do something like that, or Europe or wherever. There is going to be somebody that finds that big hole. A lot of people are still doing gi jiu-jitsu. Most people are still only doing gi jiu-jitsu. No matter what Twitter tells you, no matter what Flow Grappling tells you, most people are still training just in the gi. Obviously, way more are doing no-gi now than ever. But most people still are training traditionally in the gi. those eyes could be brought to the gi and made the same way that flow grappling has monetized no gi. Someone could monetize the gi a lot better, probably with a lot more drama and a lot more being like pro wrestling, but it's going to happen. Now let's say there's 100 times more people training and we're 10 years into the future. It will not just be separate to gi and no gi. It will start to, there's no way that we will not to start to develop other rule sets that aren't jiu-jitsu rule sets. I've told you guys, competed in combat wrestling before. Combat wrestling is basically like if somebody who really loved wrestling did jiu-jitsu for a long time and then said, hey, I want to make a rule set that valued wrestling, but jiu-jitsu was involved. And so basically it is all restarts start from the, or all restarts are to the feet. Like, so you're always starting standing. You don't restart from if you had side control and you and the guy went out of bounds. You all restarts are from the feet. And there are submissions, but you don't get like, you can't pull guard. You have to fight for takedowns, and takedowns and top position hold a lot more value. You basically get riding time in this rule set on top of just getting the takedown points. But the rule set was built around somebody who wanted to wrestle and grapple, right? Still, what we're going to be doing, of course, there are going to be Sambo guys that do it. There are going to be other guys that do it. But we all kind of believe, and I think rightly so, that jiu-jitsu is the superior grappling art. As that continues to happen, there are going to be other sports developed. There are going to be other ideas developed. Perfect example. I'm at Thanksgiving and my cousin is telling me about this medieval grappling event that he's been doing, where they travel around to all these different Renaissance fairs and they put on exhibitions and they dress up in 80 pounds of real, authentic medieval armor, and they have huge broadswords, and then they just beat each other down. But the ways to win are by takedowns and throwing your opponent outside of the ring. Eventually, if there starts to be money in that sport, grapplers would go into it, especially if you have 300 million grapplers around the world. Eventually, you are going to see all kinds of other different niche sports that are built around grappling that jiu-jitsu people will start to focus on. And most likely, they will even start to create gyms dedicated to these other sports. It will still be grappling. But I think it won't just be separated from gi and no-gi and self-defense and competition. I think that the future of jiu-jitsu will be all kinds of different niche types of jiu-jitsu, because competition or self-defense, it isn't all that there is. And if you had more options, you might actually go, maybe I'm not really a guy who loves self-defense jiu-jitsu. Maybe I'm a guy that loves ... this other type of jiu-jitsu, this other type of art that maybe has its own rule set when it comes to the sport aspect. And but it's still grappling. I guess that's kind of my long reason for why eventually jiu-jitsu will die, is because it will eventually evolve into not just being jiu-jitsu. I think it will evolve into being a lot of different niche things with a lot of different people wanting to learn that specific thing, and all kinds of different personalities or brands trying to capture your attention. And so, with all these random predictions that I made, I wanted to finish with who this imaginary future of jiu-jitsu belongs to. People who understand grappling deeply. No matter where jiu-jitsu goes, they will always be able to apply that. For example, I taught, I taught a private lesson today. And everything that we taught at the very end of it, my guy wanted to, it was just kind of, it's very general ideas. And I go, okay, if you think about it like this, everything that we have talked about from passing the guard and side control, we could apply to wrestling. And then I showed him how it all applied to wrestling. It's only because I have a deep understanding of grappling, not because I learned the moves that were on the list for me to learn at my jiu-jitsu class. It's because I understand how to grapple that I can then teach somebody who wrestles on top of teaching somebody who does jiu-jitsu, on top of teaching somebody who does judo. Even though I've never done judo and I've never wrestled, I know how to grapple. So the future of jiu-jitsu first will be for the people who understand what you're trying to accomplish when you're grappling, who actually understand how to help other people understand grappling. And then I also think the future of jiu-jitsu, and this is probably the future of everybody in society for 2033, the future is going to go to the people who do the best at converting attention into dollar bills. So if you look at these YouTube guys right now, a lot of people think like, okay, if you're getting a good amount of views on YouTube, you're rich. You're making a ton of money. But it's not like that. There are a lot of people out there that are getting a lot of views on YouTube. And so as that happens, it stops being as valuable. And not only that, but these guys that are getting views on YouTube, YouTube doesn't let you monetize it that much. You almost have to go out and find your own sponsors. And you've got to find companies that are willing to sponsor a jiu-jitsu YouTube channel, as jiu-jitsu is still in its infancy of growing. And let's say you get 1 million views on a video. That just produces for that one time. Now you need to create a new video that produces 1 million views, or you need to do a new podcast episode that produces 1 million views. And it doesn't always translate into money. A lot of times for people, it just translates into a job. It translates into something else that they're in the rat race with, where they're just constantly chasing. The ability to take those people that are viewing your YouTube channel and convert them into students in your online academy, because I think that will be the future of learning jiu-jitsu, will be whose ideas you choose to subscribe to. And not that that's not how it is now, but it will be even more this way as we develop more people that are better at explaining jiu-jitsu. But whoever learns to convert that attention into money, whoever learns to convert their, like I said, jiu-jitsu will probably be pro wrestling. And it will probably be all these different personalities fighting for your attention, just like it is now with all the different influencers and Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and all the different apps that are fighting for your attention. When you start to look at jiu-jitsu as, okay, people are now putting in so much attention into their jiu-jitsu learning, how do I monetize that? How do I get those people to listen to what I have to say? How is what I have to say actually more valuable to people? That is who will rule this future of jiu-jitsu, the people that can answer that question, the people that can take all of the eyes that there are that are going to, and all the new eyes that there will be, and take them and get people to follow them and get people to understand. And I think the best way to do that is to make some prediction 10 years from now and then be right. So yeah, just do that. Yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. Let's end this incoherent babbling right here. You award me no points, and may God have mercy on my soul. And that is the episode. I'm sorry, you guys that listened through the whole thing. Jiu-Jitsu died at the end, as I told you guys in the spoiler last week. I don't know where we're going with the podcast next Thursday, but we will be here. We will be recording something, and it will be hopefully good. Kind of have to decide on what the next few months of focus are going to be. Really spent a lot of time doing YouTube, social media, those type of things. And hopefully the next time I see you guys, I will be in a new studio and showing you guys that new studio. And then we'll be off the how to create content and we'll go back to actually creating a bunch of content. And so that is really exciting. Hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. I hope this one is helpful for you. I know it was a little bit crazier. It was a little more fun of an episode, but I still think there were some nuggets that you could probably learn from. And for a lot of people listening to this one, maybe I'm crazy and all those future predictions are wrong, but if they are right or kind of right even, you can use that to start to set your schedule and set your goals for the 2023 Jiu-Jitsu season and beyond that too. And so that is all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. I hope you guys have an excellent new year. And I hope today's episode helps you guys suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu. Have a great day, guys.